أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. As always, it's an honor and a privilege to be here amongst you, amongst the mu'mineen of Seattle. This is the last speech of the series that I'm doing. Inshallah, tomorrow I'll have one more speech here, and I'll speak about an akhlaqi topic, inshallah. But this is the last part of the 5-part speech about Lady Zainab and the aftermath of Karbala. So far we've talked about a brief biography of her, how she protected her children and how we need to protect our children. We talked about the number 40 last night on Arba'in. And inshallah, we also talked about certain aspects of how Lady Zainab mourned for her brother Imam Husayn alayhi salam and the tragedies of Karbala. So today we're going to continue that discussion about her mourning. And we're going to talk about 2 other dimensions. The first dimension we're going to talk about is how her grief affected her physically. And the second dimension we're going to talk about is how her grief affected the Muslim umma, at least a certain segment of the Muslim umma. And we're going to look at this, and hopefully we're going to try to look at our own selves and our own methods of mourning for the Imam and see if we're on the right track or not. If we are on the right track, we need to stay on the right track. If we're not on the right track, we need to figure out how to get on the right track, inshallah. So if this is okay with you, please recite aloud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So the first aspect is how her grief affected her physically. And we've all heard the stories of how her appearance changed after Karbala, how she aged, how people who grew up with her, who knew her intimately, were unable to recognize her when they saw her after Karbala. There's a hadith about when she enters Medina after the long ordeal that she went through. Her husband failed to recognize her. We also have traditions about how Hind, the wife of Yazid, who was actually close to Zainab in the family of Imam Ali alayhi salam when she was younger, but she didn't recognize Zainab even as she was having a conversation with her in Sham. And I want to talk about that story a little bit. So that story, I'm sure many of you have heard that story, but I'll just repeat it and see what we could get from that. So we know that Hind, this is according to a book called Mu'aliyah Sibtain. And Hind was raised in Medina in a Jewish family. Okay? She was a child and she became sick, and due to her illness, she became paraplegic. She was paralyzed. So her family, just like any family, tried to do everything they can to cure her, to find a cure to her sickness, to restore her to health. And they went to whatever doctors or whatever was around at that time. They exhausted all their efforts until there was nothing else that they could do, except turn to the family of Imam Ali alayhi salam. So they, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. So they weren't Muslim, but they knew that Imam Ali alayhi salam, they knew his position, they knew that, or they saw changes in the community through him. They must have seen something that would lead them to go to his house. And they enter his house and they ask him to heal their daughter, Hind. And Imam Ali alayhi salam tells Imam Husayn to sprinkle water on her face. And apparently due to the water that was sprinkled on her face, she was cured. Now, of course, after this family would increase their love for Imam Ali alayhi salam. They would do whatever they can to repay Imam Ali. And Hind herself felt indebted to the family of Imam Ali. So she would go to their house on many occasions. She would serve them. She would do whatever she could to try to make up the gift of health that the Ahlul Bayt gave her. Now, after years of interaction with the family of the Ahlul Bayt, Muawiyah comes and takes her for his son Yazid. And she gets married to Yazid, and she leaves Medina, and she goes to Sham. Now, that story ends until the caravan of the Ahlul Bayt reached Sham after Karbala. So Hind has no idea who is coming. All she knows is that a group of rebels, as she's told, fought against Yazid, stood up to the Khalifa, tried to overpower him, but were killed. And their women and their children were taken as captives. And they were taken from Karbala to Kufa, and Kufa to Sham. And then they were taken to her court. So she was the wife of Yazid, so she lived near where they were taken. And she goes and wants to see them. She dresses in fancy clothing, expensive clothing, and she sits down on a throne-like chair, some big chair, expensive chair, and is looking at the family of the Ahlul Bayt. She knows them, but she can't recognize them. She grew up with them, but she can't recognize them. Right? So she's looking at them. Zainab, when Sayyidah Zainab sees her, she automatically recognizes her as Hind bint Abdullah. Her father's name was Abdullah. Right? And Zainab puts her head down because she doesn't want, for whatever reason, maybe she didn't want Hind to recognize her. She puts her head down. And Hind, upon seeing her put her head down, addresses her and talks to her. She says, "Why did you put your head down? Where are you from?" So Sayyidah Zainab answers, "Nahnu min balad Medina." We're from the land of Medina. When Hind hears that they're from Medina, something moves inside of her. She remembers the time that she spent in Medina. So this was probably the best years of her life when she was in Medina. So she gets off the chair that she was sitting on, off the throne that she was sitting on, and sits on the floor. Sayyidah Zainab says, "Why did you come to sit on the floor?" And Hind said, out of respect for the people of Medina, I'm sitting on the floor. And then Hind talks to Zainab and she says, "Is it all right if I ask you about a family that I knew when I was in Medina?" So Zainab knows where this is going. She knows exactly what's happening, but she's composed. She's holding her emotions in. She's not letting this conversation affect her yet. And she says, "Sure, ask about who you want to ask." So Hind asks and says, "I want to know about the family of Ali alayhi salam." Right? So Zainab says, "Who in the family of Ali do you want to know about?" She says, "I want to know about Husayn and his brothers, his children. I want to know about Zainab and Kulthum." And she's looking at Zainab, talking to Zainab. She doesn't recognize. So here, Zainab's emotions overtake her. She starts to cry. Her eyes become teary. She realizes that she's not going to be able to keep her composure. And she says, "I left the family of Ali when I went to Karbala, and I have to return to the family of Ali and tell them that their family members have become martyred. She says, وَأَمَّا إِن سَأَلْتَ عَنَ الْحُسَيْنِ فَهَذَا رَأْسُهُ بَيْنَ يَدَيْ يَزِيدٍ. If you ask about Husayn, that's his head in the hands of Yazid. If you ask about Abbas and the other children, they were killed in Karbala and their heads were decapitated. وَأَمَّا فَإِن سَأَلْتَ عَنْ زَيْنَبٍ فَأَنَّ زَيْنَبْ بِنْتَ عَلِيٍّ وَهَذِهِ الْقُطُومِ. And if you ask about Zainab, I'm Zainab, the daughter of Ali, and that's al-Quthum. Now this was, you might want to turn it back on, it's over. This was the story of what happened when Sayyidah Zainab reached Hind. We've heard this discussion. We turned the lights off just a second too late, but that's okay. But we've heard this in many of the Masa'ib sections of our speeches, and that's why you guys are familiar with it. But have we examined it and thought about how is it that two people who know each other so well, she wasn't able to recognize Zainab? Why? Right? And the answer is because of the intense grief and sorrow that Sayyidah Zainab endured. Right? I looked online. Any of you could look online as well if you want. And I just looked to see what are the physical consequences of intense grief or prolonged grief. And there's a whole list, so I'll just read a couple of them for you. So one of them is that you get digestive problems, which leads to you losing weight. Now think about Sayyidah Zainab. Not only would she have these problems, she was also dragged across a desert. She wasn't given food. Whatever food she was given, she would give to the children of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. She had to have lost an immense amount of weight. Right? So her body would have been completely different, weak. Right? Another thing is you get fatigue and sleep problems. And the sleep problems lead to high blood pressure, lead to aging of the skin, and lead to baggy eyes. So Sayyidah Zainab would have lost a lot of weight. Then her face would have aged considerably, right? To the point where she would look as if she was an old woman when she wasn't. Her eyes would be baggy, and she would change so much that her husband wouldn't even recognize her when he sees her. Think about that. That's the level of grief and mourning that Sayyidah Zainab went through. Right? This intense level. Now, of course, we're never going to be able to reach that out of grief for Imam Husayn alayhi salam. Our connection to the Imam will never be stronger than the connection that Sayyidah Zainab had. We didn't witness it, no matter how many stories we hear of what happened, no matter what pictures we put in our head when we listen to the Masa'ib. We didn't see it. Sayyidah Zainab was watching the shahadat of her brother. She saw everything that unfolded. Right? The sorrow and the grief that she feels is incomparable. But when we look at the way that we mourn, right? At least around the world. I'm not acquainted with here. I haven't been here in Muharram. But around the world, it seems as if our Muharram programs are becoming more theatrical. They're becoming more about entertainment than they are about gaining closeness with Ahlul Bayt. You could see, recently I was in a place where you could choose between two different scholars. One scholar who has a beautiful voice. His voice is unbelievable. But he hasn't studied at all. And his amount of knowledge was very low. And the other scholars studied decades in Qom. His voice was also nice. He could read the Musab in a very well way, which would definitely hit the hearts of anyone. And his English was perfect. So, but unfortunately, more people gravitate towards the person with the better voice, the person who's more popular maybe, the person who gives a more entertaining speech. The latmiya, the matam, again, I don't know how it is in here, but a lot of times it's orchestrated. I've seen people, form lines in such a way that, all they're thinking about is how the video will look on YouTube instead of how they're mourning for the imam. Right? We need to look in our hearts. We're not going to age. We're not going to have that level of mourning that Lady Zainab had, that the day, right after Ashura, we're going to look different and our spouse won't recognize us. That is very unlikely to happen. But at least make sure we're really mourning for the imam. That we're coming to the center with the intentions of getting closer to the imam, remembering the imam, remembering the tragedies that the family of the Ahlul Bayt went through, and how we could implement these lessons in our life today. And we have to have that in mind. We have to have these intentions. Right? So this is something that everyone on an individual basis has to look within their heart and has to make these intentions when you come, inshallah, next year to Muharram sessions. And also for the rest of these nights while you're mourning for the Ahlul Bayt as well. Inshallah, with Shaykh Amin Rastani when he comes. And Shaykh Amin is one of the scholars who studied a long time, almost 2 decades now. And he's very intelligent. He has a lot of knowledge and you can benefit a lot from him. So you should be excited that he's going to come and give lectures for you. Please recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ala. Now the second section of this speech is about how the mourning of Lady Zainab changed the ummah of the Prophet. Now there's so much that I could talk about that. I have to limit myself here. So I'm only going to talk about one aspect of this. So you could see how she dealt with the people who killed her family. That's one way that's one dimension you could look at. You could look at how she addresses the people of Kufa. You could look at how she addresses the leaders of Kufa and the people in Sham as well. We're only going to look at how she addresses the people of Kufa. And the other ones, inshallah, if we have the opportunity and the tawfiq in another night, we might be able to touch upon. Now, so Sayyidah Zainab and the Ahlul Bayt were dragged from Karbala to Kufa. Right? So everyone right now, alhamdulillah, has walked from Najaf, which is right next to Kufa, to Karbala. They walked the other way. Right? So they reach Kufa, and Sayyidah Zainab, there's people on the streets. And the caravan's walking through the streets, people gather, and Sayyidah Zainab addresses these people. She talks to the people of Kufa, not the governors, the people. Now these people are important people. We could learn from these people. We could try to examine ourselves and compare ourselves to these people. These are important people to look at. These are people who believed in Imam Husayn alayhi salam. These are people who wrote letters asking for the Imam to come and overthrow the tyrant who's ruling over them. They wanted Imam Husayn to become their leader. They begged Imam Husayn to come. They wrote over 12,000 letters to the Imam for him to leave his city and come to theirs and be their leader. And then they let the army of Yazid slaughter him. They turned their back on him when he needed them the most. They didn't follow through with their pledges of allegiance. So it's very important. Now Sayyidah Zainab is addressing these people, the people who asked her father or her brother to come and then turned their backs on him. Right? So this is an intense meeting. Right? All of these people feel guilty right now. Right? They know they're at fault. They feel guilty. And they're looking at the sister of Imam Husayn, who's grief-stricken, who's aging. Right? This is a person who's addressing them. And let's see what she says to them. She says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wa salatu ala Abi Muhammad wa alihi at-tayyibin al-akhyar. Amma ba'd, ya ahl al-Kufa, ya ahl al-Khatl wal-Qadr. Atabkun? All praise is due to Allah. Blessings be upon my father, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. How many people are there that could say that? That close to the Prophet. And upon his righteous progeny. Do you weep now, O people of Kufa? People of deception? May your tears never cease. And may the resounding calamity never stop. Your similitude is she who unravels her yarn, disintegrating it into pieces after she has spun it strongly. Now this is a good, example that she gives. These are people, as I said, they wrote letters, they asked for the Imam to come. Their faith is strong. But because they turn their backs on the Imam, it's as if their faith disintegrates. They lose whatever they've gained. They lose everything. Right? They had faith and they lost it. For us, inshallah, we're counted amongst the lovers of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. Inshallah, we have faith. But just like the people of Kufa, it's possible we lose our faith. It's possible we do something in the future. We turn our back on the person we're calling, on the Imam we're calling for. If that happens, we'll have nothing. Right? We should learn from these people. Sayyidah Zainab continues, truly bad is that which your souls have committed. You have reaped the wrath of Allah, remaining in the chastisement for eternity. Right? So it's easy for us to condemn these people. It's easy for us to sit in the comfort of Sydney. Our lives are not in danger. There's no one over us to kill us if we say we're going to join the Imam. It's easy for us to condemn them, to say they should have went and fought with the Imam. They should have defended the Imam. They called him over and they turned their backs on him. These are bad people. Easy for us to do that. Very easy. People are talking bad about the people of Kufa till today. When Sayyid Khamenei walks in a room, what do people say? Ma ahl Kufa nistim Ali tenha bemunay. We're not the people of Kufa for Ali to remain alone. Right? Even till today, the people of Kufa are chastised for these actions 1,000 years ago. Right? It's easy now to condemn. Right? Let's continue. Let's see what she says. She says, Atabkun wa tantajibun ay wallah fabku kathiran wadhaku qalilan falaqad dhahabtum bi'araha wa shananaha. Do you really cry and sob? So these are people that are crying in front of her. She's saying, are you really crying and sobbing? By Allah, you should cry a great deal and laugh very little. You have earned nothing but shame and infamy, and you shall never be able to wash it away. Right? Think about what these people must be thinking. Right? And there's a reason why Sayyidah Zainab is talking. Right? Don't think that Imam Sajjad alayhi salam is not the leader of this caravan. Imam Sajjad is the living Imam. Everyone is following his command. he has Sayyidah Zainab address the crowd. Why? If he addresses them as a man, the people will have a different reaction. The people might, take offense. The people might puff their chests out with pride. The people, it won't pierce their hearts. But when it's a woman, it affects them. It's a woman who's lost everything. She's lost her children. She lost her brothers. She lost her nephews. She lost her family. This is a person addressing them. It hurts. If you have a shred of humanity, it hurts. Right? There's a reason. And it wasn't only Sayyidah Zainab. After her, the Imam ordered Kulthum to address them, and then other members of the Ahlul Bayt, until the people couldn't take it anymore. He made them recognize their error. Right? Sayyidah Zainab continues, how could you wash it away? How could you do so? You killed the descendant of the bearer of the last message. You killed the very essence of the message. You killed the master of the youths of paradise. You killed the refuge of the righteous from among you. You killed the one who saves you from calamity. You killed the beacon of your guidance. You killed the keeper of your traditions. These people must be dying listening to this. How horrible is the sin that you bear. May you be distanced and crushed. You're doomed with servitude and humiliation. And she doesn't end there. She continues. I'll read one more paragraph for you, just to pound this in. Right? Imagine yourself as them, listening to this. She says, woe to you, O people of Kufa. Do you know whose heart you have burned? Do you know what feet you have labored for? Do you know what blood you have shed? Do you know what sanctity you have violated? You have done a monstrous deed, something for which the heavens are split asunder, the mountains crumble, the skies are crying. Remember last night we read a hadith that says that the skies cried for Imam Husayn alayhi salam and Prophet Yahya by turning red. So Sayyidah Zainab is referencing that. Don't you see it? This is because of your actions. You called the Imam and then turned your back on him. They're not the ones who killed him, but she's saying you killed him. You're the reason, right? You have a share in his murder. Surely the torment of the hereafter is greater, and you shall not be helped. So they cry and they cry and they cry. The men are wailing. The women are slapping themselves. And as I said, Imam Sajjad has one after the other address them until they can't take it anymore. Now, think about it. As I said, it's easy to condemn them. Very easy to condemn them. Right? What they did is clearly wrong. But what about us? What are we doing? We pray, inshallah, every day for our Imam to come, do we not? Allahumma ajjal waliyakal faraj. We do a ahad, which we mentioned yesterday. All the du'as, everything that we do, we end the programs with the ziyarat of the Imam. We are always asking for his return. Right? Is that not like a letter? We're not writing him a letter, but we're asking him to return. That's not the same thing that the people of Kufa did? We're verbally, we want this. What are our actions? Are our actions equal with our verbal request? Are we doing anything to prepare ourselves for his return? Anything at all? Do we think about it? What can I do as an individual to hasten his appearance? Or am I just saying, oh, please come back? Or am I thinking, what can my community do to hasten his appearance? Collectively, what can we do to build this groundwork for him to return? Or are we just giving lip service? Right? What are we doing? Because if we don't prepare ourselves, what's going to happen? You've read the hadith. What's going to happen? If we're not prepared when the Imam comes, we will turn our backs on him. When he comes, if we're not ready for him, we haven't done anything to prepare ourselves. We just say, oh, come, 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 just because everyone else is saying it, or just because we learned to say it. Right? But we don't prepare ourselves in action. When he comes, just as the people of Kufa are so easily condemned, we will be. How Zainab was talking to the people of Kufa will be addressed. The shame that the people of Kufa will have in the hereafter will have. Don't think that we're better than them. We're doing something that, separates us from the people of Kufa. If we're not actively seeking to prepare ourselves, we're just like him. Now, on an individual basis, what can we do? The simplest thing, there's many things we can do. The simplest, bottom line thing we can do is taqwa, is have piety. At least be spiritually prepared. This is something that is encouraged to us throughout the Quran. It's encouraged to us throughout ahadith. Every Friday prayer we have to say, Usikum wa nafsi bi taqwallah. I advise you and myself to piety in both khutbahs. We're always reminded of piety. Piety also isn't something impossible. It's not something difficult. Right? It's performing our wajibat, staying away from the muharramat. Right? You don't do anything to displease the imam. Right? When you sin, it hurts him. There's a tradition that says that Allah informs the imam of the actions of the Shia once a week. Once a week. So think about the actions that we perform in the week. Inshallah, we're counted as a Shia. And think about the actions that we perform. A record of our deeds is given to the Imam. The Imam is aware of what we do. The Imam says, what I hear about my Shia, with lack of better words, I'm not directly quoting, but he says he's astonished. It shocks him. He wouldn't think that the Shia would commit such actions. And the one thing that hurts is that he says he cries over the sins that the Shia commit. So when you don't have taqwa, you're sinning. When you sin, the Imam is crying because of your actions. You're sitting there, we're sitting there saying, oh Allah, hasten his appearance. And in action, we're making him cry. In action, he's ashamed of us. He's only away from us because of us. We're the cause of him not being here. If 313 of us step up and prepare ourselves the way we should, he'd be here. Right? It's because of us he's not here. So don't be so quick to condemn the people of Ahl Kufa, right? The people of Kufa. We need to look at ourselves first. We need to prepare ourselves. So inshallah, I'm not trying to, depress us, right? I'm not trying to put us down, right? And I talk to myself before any of you. But inshallah, we need to encourage ourselves to be prepared for him. So when he comes, we accept his call. When he comes, we meet him. When he comes, we defend him. We be one of his close companions where we're able to kiss his hand and his forehead. Right? Inshallah, we all pray for that we could be one of these companions. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Inshallah, I want to talk about the time today when the caravan of the Ahlul Bayt finally, after all of the ordeals, reach the outskirts of Medina. They're about to enter the city. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam holds them up and tells them to wait. And he sends Bashir in to inform the people that Imam Husayn alayhi salam was martyred. So Bashir goes into Medina, addresses the people. He informs them that Imam Husayn alayhi salam was martyred. And when he says this, all of the people of Medina come around him. And one woman asks, "Did you say that Imam Husayn was martyred?" And he says, "Yes, he's reached Shahadat." She asks again, "Did you just say that Imam Husayn alayhi salam was martyred?" And he responds, "Yes, sister, he was martyred." She asks a third time, "Are you saying he's martyred?" And he says, "Yes." She says, "I don't believe you. There's no way that he was martyred. Where's Abu Fadl Abbas? He's there to protect him." Right? And when she said that, everyone knows that after Sayyidah Zahra was martyred, after she passes away, Imam Ali alayhi salam asked his brother Aqil to find a sister, one of the best sisters amongst the Arabs, who will be able to provide children to protect Imam Husayn. And he finds a sister named Fatima, who's later known as al-Banin, and she gives birth to Abbas and a number of other children who all give their lives protecting Imam Husayn in Karbala. But Bashir at this point has to inform them what happened to Abbas. He has to tell the people of Medina how Imam Husayn was left alone and there is no one to protect him. So he says, after everyone was killed, only Abbas and Imam Husayn were left. Everyone else, all of the companions, all of the other soldiers of the Ahlul Bayt were martyred. And it was Abbas and Imam Husayn. Abbas goes to Imam Husayn, "Hal min rukhsa," asks for permission to go to battle. The Imam cries. He says, "How could I let you go? You're the commander of the army. Without you, there's no one left. There'll be no one left in my army." Abbas says, "Please, I want to fight these hypocrites. Let me go." Imam Husayn says, "First, go get water for the children." Now, Abbas would never go anywhere without the order of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. Imam Husayn ordered him to get the water. So Abbas goes in front of the enemy. He asks them for water for the children. They refuse him. He doesn't want to go back empty-handed. He doesn't want to go back failing to fulfill the order of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. So he jumps on his horse and he has a sword. He puts the water pouch around his neck and he heads off to the river. There's 4,000 soldiers guarding these river banks. He's able to push through. He's the son of Imam Ali alayhi salam. He's able to push through. He gets to the river banks. He jumps off the horse. He fills the water pouch up. He takes water in his hands to drink. He remembers Imam Husayn. He remembers the thirst of the children who were crying, "Al-Atash, Al-Atash, Al-Atash." He doesn't drink the water. He throws it back. He said, "This is not my religion to drink." He gets back on the horse and he tries to bring the water to the children of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. The enemy knew that they couldn't fight him one-on-one. So they hid behind trees. They hid behind hills. They ambushed him. So he's running past one of them on the horse and they strike his arm. His right arm falls. It's severed. And as this happens, he changes and he gets the sword in his left hand. He says that even though you've taken my right hand, I'll still defend my religion. And he goes a little further. They hit his left arm. His left arm's detached. He has no arms anymore. He's still on the horse. Somehow he's holding his balance. He's not falling. But finally someone shoots an arrow which hits the water pouch and the water drips out. When that happened, he gives up. His only hope was to bring the water back to the children of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. So the arrows keep coming. One hits him in his eye and he falls off the horse. He falls off the horse. Ya Akhi, Ya Aba Abdullah, Imam Husayn runs. Imagine what he sees when he sees his brother on the floor. No arms, his eyes are covered in blood. Imagine the sight. Allahu Akbar. Imagine this sight. So Bashir tells them, it's at this point that Imam Husayn says, Al-an in qasra dahri. Now my back is broken. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Ya Husayn. Ya Husayn.